there, and welcome to episode 9 of the Tyre Kickers, the podcast where we talk structured nonsense about classic cars.
Coming up on this episode, stop. Hammer time. We're at the auctions looking at some classics, but this time we're eyeing up the no reserve corner. Could these auction bottom feeders be your top choice?
Also ahead, get a grip. What's the classic car to set your pants on fire? We list the ones that give you all the feels and the sweaty palms to boot.
Plus, all your comments, reactions, brickbats, and bouquets.
So let's give this old thing a push start, bring up the clutch, and pray for some combustion as we fire up episode 9 of the Tyre Kickers. Well, yes, we're back, and the weather has finally morphed into something resembling classic car weather, although at the time we're recording this and looking out the window, it's stuttering again, a bit like an MG midget that's not been started in a while. So please, Mother Nature, stick some additive in the weather. Give us a summer, will you?
Yeah, for those short 2 days or so that the sun did shine, it was great to see us all out in our cars, and also remembering why we're renewing the insurance, buying the parts, paying the garage bills, etc. I got the Porsche 912 out and went to Gatwick, not on holiday, but to get the interior improved. And so it turns out my original 1966 Porsche 912 is not so original. So here's a list of the stuff that isn't quite right. The seats are from a 1968. The sun visors are from a 1968. There's wrong vinyl on the door tops, on the knee rolls, trim handles, rear door tops. It's got a wrong partial shelf that was built in DIY woodwork. There's no rear coat hooks. It's got the wrong rear seat pads, the wrong rear air vents, the wrong carpets.
I think this is karma for you, you know, because I think you're a bit of a Rain Man for originality. And so somebody's basically gone through your car and said, "You change that, change that, change that." Normally you're the stato of originality, aren't you? Oh, well, I think you'll find that's not original. That's not original. I've sent you pictures of Porsche and you go, "That's not the original night. They're not right. They're not right." So it's a bit of karma coming back on you, I think.
Yeah, but when I'm footing the bill, all of a sudden I care slightly less about my own car. Other people's cars, rip them apart. But this one, no, I'm going to leave it. But it is going to get to a point, it's going to look pretty decent. The headlining was black felt, which was awful. So we're getting the kind of factory cream headlining on it. So that'll look nice and it will look better. It's not going to be perfect, but I can't afford perfect. So I'm just going to make do.
Did you cry a little bit when they started going through the list?
I just stood there and grimaced, to be honest, and I pretended that I knew the seats were 68, even though I thought the seats were original. So I just sat there and went, okay. And then after a while, I think he realised that I was about to burst into tears, and he took pity on me and made a cup of tea.
Apart from checking out the original bits, you've also been checking out some cars while I've been away. I've been on holes, but you've been at the Historics auction in Farnborough, haven't you?
Oh, I had a great time there. It's the first auction I've been to this year, and I do love a good auction. I did spend a good part of a day there getting on everybody's nerves, having a good route through the cars. We're going to talk about this more later, but the Historics auction is always pretty good. They've got some good sites, they've got some good stuff. And I had a really good look at 3 or 4 cars that I put up in our Instagram account as No Reserve Heroes. We'll talk about those. And also I've picked out a couple of cars that haven't sold that will probably be popping up at an auction near you soon, so they might be 2 good cars. But yeah, a load of stuff, and you walk in that hangar and you think, great, I've got 4 hours off and I've got 150 cars to work my way through. It's just bliss.
Nice. Well, we'll get onto that in a minute. As mentioned, I've been away on my holes. I had to send you that one to do that one on your own. Unfortunately, I had to blow you out on that one because I ran away basically from the crap weather. I went to the Canary Islands, and even though I should have just been, relaxing on the sun lounger, I kind of had one eye open like a sort of snake looking for classic cars. In fact, we went and took a drive around the back roads and saw quite a few, mainly old Mercs, and I put them up on our Instagram account. I nearly did a U-turn, honestly, for one. I was going up a hill on the side of a mountain, and down the hill came this sky blue W114115, I think it was, from the 70s. It looked gorgeous, and I nearly swiveled the hire car around to go and have another look at it. But I pulled up at a shop, and a guy got out of an old W123 that his dad had, and he gave to him. And I said to my wife, I want to talk to him. And she sort of rolled her eyes, and off I went. And using my broken Spanish and the international sign language, I managed to get the story out of him about he was 40 years old. He's been handed down this car. He still tools around in it. And it just looked great in the sunshine. It was a bit weathered, like we all are, but it was still in use. He said it drives like a boat. He said, but he tours around in it, and there's loads of those old Mercs on the Canary Islands. So that was really nice to look at. Not so great for my other half, who thought she was getting a week off from talking about classic cars, but we were sort of chasing them. But yeah, it has to be done. And then I came back home to the good weather, all 2 days of it. So the day after getting back from holiday, I got the car out. My son had an away football game 45 minutes away from home. So I thought, okay, so you have that dilemma, don't you? That'd be a good drive. And it was a good drive down and through the countryside. Will I make it? Will the car make it? Do I need to be worried? So I took the risk and sort of nervously drove down the A roads. When I say nervously, you sort of, when you drive out your car for the first time after a while, you are a little bit apprehensive. I also need some suspension work done, so that's in the back of my mind.
Oh, okay.
But after it ran out perfectly. Picked him up. We went to the pub on the way back, and then blasted it along the A303 and the M3. I was a bit more chilled out by then, and I thought, do you know what? I normally avoid motorways, but my wife was in another car, so it was like I had a support vehicle, and I just gunned it. And it was an absolute blast. The car didn't bat an eyelid. And I sort of thought, here's a question for you. Why are you always more relaxed driving your car on the way home than you are when you drive it out?
Well, I think it's the kind of relief of turning round and thinking I'm heading home so I can just limp home. I'm getting closer rather than further away. But that's a really good point, isn't it, about when you blast a car, because it always feels better. And mechanics always talk about this. They talk about the Italian tune-up. You know, if you rev it and floor it, it performs better. But what is that? We need a kind of word for that mechanical zeitgeist, that when you've used something and you've gone flat out, it just feels better. It feels 10% better. It feels more alive. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a thing. It's definitely there.
I think as a driver, you feel more relaxed as well. I think when you go out to start with, the car's cold, you're wondering, is it going to be all right since the last time I used it? And then you run it up for half an hour, and then it's perfectly fine. So on the way back, after you've had a nice day out and had a good chat, you're feeling in a good mood, I tend to gun it back a bit more. And I'm getting a real pleasure out of gunning. We'll talk about this later in the podcast when we talk about cars that are fun to drive. I'm finding my car, the more I gun it, the more I enjoy it. It doesn't really go very fast, but that's the thing. So, yeah, I enjoyed that. It was nice to get the cars out, and that lasted a couple of days. And then looking out the window now, we've gone back to the sort of default cloud thing. So hopefully the sun will come back at some point. The calendar is filling up, or certainly my diary is filling up with loads of car meets and stuff to do. I just want to get out in the car. I just don't want rain and cloud or that sort of unsettled thing. We just need sunshine, don't we? So, lots of activity online on our social feeds since we last spoke. Lots of new followers on our Instagram page as well. So, hello if you've just found us and you're along for the ride. Welcome to you. What we lack in knowledge, we make up for in sarcasm, I'd say, Max, wouldn't you?
There's a lot of sarcasm in that case, because we don't have much knowledge. So, yeah, sarcasm plus.
Thank you for all those comments. We'd love to see those. So let's get into some of those and give you some honourable mentions. Max, what have you got?
Well, we've got to take our hat off to Bettina Misfit on Instagram. Listen to this, real name Lee. Lee is a race mechanic, and he got in touch to say he's a new listener and had listened to all 8 episodes back to back while on a 9-hour road trip.
What a nutter.
I know. Poor bloke. To deliver a Porsche 911 race car on a trailer. Does he need a medal, or is that some therapy? Anything. Anyway, he's asked for a sticker. It's on its way. Well done, Lee. I don't think I could listen to this for 8 hours, so good job.
Yeah, just one episode while I'm talking to you is
1
enough,
minute.
To be honest. Yeah, well done, Lee. And it's nice to have somebody in the sort of race industry listen to us. That's really flattering. So thank you very much. Talking of Tyre Kickers stickers, Matt, another Matt who goes by the name of Stanley, the Series 3 on Insta, sent us a shot of his Tyre Kickers sticker proudly on the back of his blue Series 3 Land Rover. So thank you, Matt, for that. It's looking really good. Thank you for the photo and the support as well. I'm going to put that up on our Instagram, actually, if you want to have a look. And if you send us your pictures of your Tyre Kicker stickers, we'll put them up on Instagram as well.
Now, regular listener Keith D'Souza sent us some detailed feedback on our last episode. In particular, he picked up on our Mundane Motors feature, where we celebrated and also slagged off some boring classics. He says mundane motors need to be celebrated, and he's, quote, giddy with excitement about seeing cars like Allegros and Marinas at the Festival of the Unexceptional. His point being that they were unexceptional, But now as only a few remain, they really do stand out.
It looks like you have a kindred spirit there, Max. Yes, you can go together and nerd over some Allegros and Marinas. Moving on, Dave, who goes by the handle Garage of Awesome, has been in touch and sent us lots of nice photos and messages about classics he spotted down under in Oz. He's also sent us some voice notes about some of the stuff he spotted. Are we encouraging that, Max? I wasn't sure it was somebody trying to give me a booty call.
Pretty much guarantee that won't happen. He was talking in great detail about the DeLorean in Back to the Future, because I think we might have said that it was a great product placement, but actually it was beyond product placement because I think they'd gone out of business by then. So it was a very detailed and welcome correction. Thank you, because it was particularly, I think, you who said that. So yeah, nice to see you correcting.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. Moving on, Joel on Insta also reacted to one of the cars we spotted at the auctions, a really nice Jag XJS. Now, he suggested, following our feature on Resto Mods, the last episode, that this particular XJS would make a good candidate for the Resto Mod treatment. But I was sort of thinking, I don't know you, Max, but what do you Resto Mod an XJS to?
Well, exactly. That's an E-Type.
You're talking about backdating. I think he's talking about thingying it up, sort of beefing it up. But, I mean, it's going to have a good engine in it already, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the other thing with the XJS is they looked, it's maturing nicely, unlike us.
Or have you had 5 pints? Is that the problem, that you've had a few drinks and now the XJS kind of looks beautiful where it looked ugly before?
I think I probably need new glasses. That's probably what the problem is. Niche car storage in Suffolk, like the Merc 123 that I spotted in Lanzarote, described it as beautiful. I'd agree with that. It was pretty tired, but I would agree. It had something about it, and especially in the sunshine. Also, an honourable mention to another classic car podcast called My Dad's Car, which I discovered while I was away. I gave this a listen while on holiday. And it's a great idea, Max. It's about your first car memories and the cars your parents had. It's done by Andy and John. It's a really good listen. And I may be appearing on there soon myself, so I'll let you know if that comes off. But it's the nostalgia about what you grew up in. You've talked about this in previous episodes. You've got very visceral memories of being in the back of that Austin Allegro, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Are they aware of what a high-maintenance podcast partner you are? I might need to warn them about that.
I told them it's not you, it's me. And I've got very, very low, low needs.
Now, keep those comments, photos, messages and voice notes coming in. We love the interaction and particularly the correction. Comment on our stuff and you're likely to get a mention in this section. Also, please tag us into your content, especially if you're out with a classic. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, and if you want a Tyre Kickers car sticker, just check out our post on our socials to find out how you can get one. Where do you find all this, you're asking? Well, here's the answer. On Instagram, we're at the Tyre Kickers UK. And on Facebook, it's the Tyre Kickers. And that's 3 separate words. So, still to come, we'll talk about the classic cars that are such a good drive, they set your pants on fire. But first, classic car auctions. Well, they can be the place to snatch a bargain, if that is, you're brave enough.
Especially if you hang around the lower end of the market like us. We are the classic car bottom feeders, seeing what's scraping the barrel at auction, which means those cars marked with the sacred words, no reserve.
So we sent Max to snoop around at the recent Historics auction in Farnborough. He found 6 motors with no reserve and stuck them up on our Instagram account as the ones to watch. Now, the nerd, aka Max, also gave them a good look over and then eagle-eyed the results from the sale. So, Max, report back. What were they and what were your findings?
Okay, so I put them on Instagram. Now, first up was this really nice 1990 Daimler 66 Series 3, a 5.3 litre. So this is basically an XJ series. Not particularly popular, last seen driven by Arthur Daly. But this one was a strange one, to be honest. It had 131,000 miles, was really good condition inside and out, but the auction description said it might need some recommissioning. Now, I don't know what that means. It might need a full restoration or it might need a bit of WD-40 sprayed on the seat motor. It's one of those kind of gambles, isn't it?
It's sort of like estate agent speak for has potential.
Exactly.
Recommission can mean it's sat for a long time.
But it was beautiful, but it's been dry stored for 30 years, 131,000 miles, really nice interior, really nice exterior. That went for 8,421, which I don't think is that bad actually, because the last of this model, Daimler 66, is not that many of them around. Really nice cars, not that popular, but $8,000 gets you into it. Again though, it's that 5.3 litre V12 that can throw up some enormous bills. and it needs recommissioning. So whoever did it was brave. I take my hat off to them. That was a brave buy. Not too expensive, nice car, but could actually bankrupt you.
I was going to say, because there's a shot on the auction catalogue of the engine bay, and I've looked that up and my eyebrows have gone up.
Every time I see a V12 in a photograph, it just gives me nightmares.
So just before we skip on to the next one, Max, for 8.5, would you have pulled the trigger on it?
Absolutely not, because it's that V12, and I just don't think that it's a special enough car. They're really nice, the Daimler 66s, but they're not so special you'd take the risk.
Okay, right, moving on. Car number 2, what have you seen and what have you found?
A 1991 Mercedes-Benz 190e Sportline. So this is a really nice car when it was new. This one, it was a little bit rough, to be honest. I was quite surprised. The door cards were coming off. The rear door didn't open. The lacquer was peeling all over the place. It's got that second-hand car nightmare, which is a used tow bar that's been taken off. So clearly it's been used for towing. So it won't have been pulling something light. That'll be something heavy. This went for $6,944. I thought that was quite high. I really do like these Mercs, but this one wasn't the best one.
It says in the descriptions, XJK Jamiroquai. Do you think that bumped the price up a little bit to almost $7,000?
He seems to have bought virtually every car in Britain for sale at some point. So I'm not quite sure, to be honest. I think it was just a bit too of a mundane version. It was not a great colour in that kind of 1990s gold, and the interior was all right. It just looked a bit flat, to be honest. I was really looking forward to seeing this car. From 10 yards, I thought, oh, nice. From 1 yard, I went, ugh.
Bit nothingy for me. No, next. Moving on, we've got 76. Oh, here we go. Silver Shadow. You still got this thing about bloody Silver Shadows.
Well, I looked at this one and I thought, again, it's a nice Silver Shadow. It's in auction. It's obviously a huge risk. Let's go and have a look at it. I got close to it again, and it's this Georgian silver colour. And on Rolls's, if you do any paintwork in Georgian silver, you can never get it to match. It's the most impossible colour to match. And it didn't match on this one. Even in the front page photograph on the screen here, you can see the driver's door doesn't quite match the rear door. It doesn't quite match the front panels. And this was a pretty average one, to be honest. It's a 1976, so one of the later Mark Is. For some mysterious reason, and I don't know why, the owner had put a Nardi steering wheel on a Rolls Royce. It just looks so wrong. But actually, when I started to look at it a bit closely, the interior wasn't bad. The woodwork inside was quite nice. Paintwork on the outside, tired. Again, the lacquer was going. Didn't seem to have any rust. It was a bit meh, to be honest. I think with these Silver Shadows, you either have to buy the very worst and take the risk, or buy a really nice one and just luxuriate in it. This was a kind of in-between car, but sold for $7,397. So again, not an expensive risk, but it kind of fell between two stools for me. I do love Silver Shadows. That one was a bit not one thing or the other. It's not a super cheap car, quite a cheap car, but it's not an expensive, really nice looking one.
Okay, next up, we've got an 89 Mark I Golf GTI Cabriolet in that kind of classic white. Now, I thought these were quite sought after, but why would this have no reserve on it? And why did it sell for relatively low money?
Two reasons. This was a Cat D, so it's a Cat D insurance loss car, so at some point it's kind of been written off. And secondly, 175,000 miles on a GTI. That's quite a lot, even for a Volkswagen of this era. I don't think the colour was quite right. I don't think the white works on it. These are becoming more popular, though. I think 2 or 3 years ago, you could have picked this up for about $2,000. This sold for $5,600, which is strong money for a Cat D, 175,000 miles. And also the interior had been butchered for various stereos and upgrades. So it was a pretty average car that I thought got quite decent money, to be honest. I don't think that's too bad for that.
How do you do 175,000 miles in a Cabriolet? Because most of the time you have the roof up, and I imagine that roof is pretty rattly. Yeah, so it's a lot of mileage, isn't it, for a convertible?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to wear out in that engine and suspension. So I thought that was a bit of a punt, to be honest. I'm surprised it got that high. I think for me that was about a £3,000 or £4,000 car, and they're not that expensive in the classifieds.
So car number 4, 1991 BMW 325i convertible, another convertible. This is one that you said you quite fancied putting a bid on. Did you keep your hands in your pockets?
I did, but I love this car, to be honest. My sticky fingerprints are all over this. And this is one of my points. This is a 1991 car, and it's starting to become really popular. Now, these 325i's are great. They handle really nicely. They're still relatively cheap. Engines are good. The 2.5 6-cylinder. It's a manual, and it's just a beautiful car. Now, this one was a little bit off, to be honest. I had a really good look around this. Bit of bubbling on the rear wheel arches, not that difficult to fix. The battery box was rusty. Now, that's quite a common fault on these 325s, well, these 3 Series of this era. That can be relatively easy fixed as well. I opened the boot, went through the carpets. Toolkit was a bit rusty. The boot floors was a bit rusty. And I looked at the service history. There was a big gap for about 12 years and 40,000 miles. So not a perfect example, but a really nice car. Great colour. All the wheels had been done. The interior had been freshly re-trimmed in leather. This was a corker. And I think actually it sold for $12,880 plus the auction fees. And I think that is a really good buy. It's on song at the moment. Everybody wants these late 80s, early 90s cars. It's a beautiful driving car. I think that was a really good buy. If you did that up, it's probably at retail 18, 19,000, I suppose. I think that's a corker. Yeah, I really did fancy that, to be honest. It was a nice car.
And then your 5th car is one that we spoke about earlier, where we mentioned that one of the listeners suggested that this could be resto modded. But actually, I think it's quite nice on its own. 1987 sort of burgundy red Jaguar XJS Coupe, 5.3 litre. What was the story with this one?
Well, normally I'd say do not go near a V12. And I've been saying that for years because they're expensive. But the reason to go near this one is £5,000. It sold for £5,040. This is an 87 XJS Coupe. Paintwork was nice in red. Beige interior. Interior was nice. All the wheels are lovely. Carpets are good. Obviously, you can't vouch for the engine, but the actual car and the interior and the look of it was fantastic. If you had just given it a really good polish because it had some swirl marks on it, that would look gorgeous. And for £5,000, I just can't understand why that was so cheap. It's an XJS. It can do 143 miles an hour in complete comfort. It looks cool, and it went for $5,000. I know Jags the values are a bit weak at the moment, but that was an absolute steal. That was my steal of the auction, actually. $5,000 for an XJS V12. Absolute corker.
So those are the sort of 5 that you spotted then. So they're quite good spots. What about generally the auction? Can you give us an upsum in terms of like values, whether there was like appetite, whether everything sold? Did you get a sense that the market was dormant, or did you get a sense that there was a bit of activity and interest?
I think the market is still quite quiet for various reasons. I think what I noticed from this one is that the really good stuff, there was a gorgeous BMW 635i that just looked factory fresh. It just looked amazing, and that got good money. And then equally, there was a 1987, I think, Porsche 911 Targa that was a little bit tired, felt like it needed a clutch, and that didn't sell. So I think the really top stuff is still selling and selling for strong money. I think the slightly weaker stuff isn't going. And we've got 2 examples here, actually. These are my 2 picks of things that got away. And one we've talked about before is the XK120. Now, I had a really good look around this XK120. It's a corker. It's red with a red interior. Somebody has brought it over from the States and converted it from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. So automatically, it's not going to be worth a huge amount of money. But they've restored it really nicely. A very good Jaguar restorer has done it. Somebody kept it for about 11 years. And this didn't sell. And the estimate, was £65,000 to £75,000. Didn't sell. I looked at it. It's gorgeous.
And what about pagodas? Because there were 1 or 2 in the auction, and we have been talking about high values. Did that one sell? There was a quite nice red one, I think.
Well, this red one, strangely, again, had a good look at this. The estimate was £57,000 to £65,000, 107,000 miles, 230 SL pagoda, really nice. Didn't sell. I was really surprised about that because it was nice. Black interior had been done really well. Paintwork was good. It's a pagoda. It's a 230 SL, so it's an early one. I thought that would have sold straight away, so that didn't sell, and I was surprised about that. So the 2 examples of the ones that got away are that XK120 and that pagoda, because that pagoda is a very sweet car, and also they're retailing for around 95 to 105,000. So I think that's a good bet.
And the other big question I've got really is, did anybody recognize you? Did anybody come up to you and go, are you that guy from the podcast?
Luckily, no, because as I found with a couple of dealers, saying I do a podcast called The Tyre Kickers does not actually win you any friends. I think the clue is in the title. I'm a tyre kicker, not particularly a tyre buyer. So no, I kept that quiet.
So nobody came up and said, which one are you? Are you, you're a bit more ugly than I thought in real life. You're a bit shorter. No? So it's exactly like your Radio 1 days then. Nobody recognised you.
Which of the miserable gits are you? Are you the one miserable git or the other miserable git? Oh no, I'm both of them.
Okay then, so moving onwards and forwards, here's a question. Why do you buy, own and run a classic car? Now, we've talked about this in previous episodes. Is it for the feels? Well, a lot of the time it is. It makes a drive an event and not just from A to B or to run a commute like your daily car does. Some cars, though, are more exciting than others.
Now, I'm talking here about the cars that make you go, oh. The ones within a few seconds that tell you you're driving something special, a bit hot, a bit naughty, a car that could set your pants on fire.
Right, nice words, but what do you actually mean? Are we talking, Max, here about the ragged edge of grip, a touch of what opposite lock coming out that corner, or the perfectly executed handbrake turn? Is it all just about ragging stuff? Because not for the first time I'm asking, what the hell are you on about?
I've talked about this before on earlier episodes. For example, how a Triumph Dolomite Sprint absolutely comes alive when you barrel it into a corner. It's the moment where a car goes from just being four wheels to being something special. How, for example, an E-Type feels in a long, sweeping bend. You get it hunkered down and balanced, and it really comes alive. So it's that feeling, that tingling feeling, you're thinking, I'm driving something special here. Now, here's two examples. I just want to use these to illustrate my point. Here's a fine example of a handling car that really gave me the tingle in its time. It's a bit of an odd choice, but it's the Mark I Volkswagen Scirocco. Now, they rusted for fun, and so this one I found, I've had to go to Germany to find this example here on your screen. But look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I remember first owning one of these and thinking, oh, it's a bit tatty, it was a bit rusty. I think it was a kind of beige colour and the rust was running down it, like you get rust on the outside of a ship. It kind of stained the car. And I thought, do I really want this? And I bought it and it was cheap. And I got in it and drove it and thought, oh my God, this is really nice. And it drives beautifully, partly because it's actually a small engine. It's a 1.6 GTI shared with a Mark I Golf GTI. It's only about 106 bhp or something. But this Scirocco weighed 800 kilograms and it absolutely flew in the corners. It was fantastic. The brakes were rubbish because converting to right-hand drive, you had a torque tube that got to the brake servo somehow, and it kind of lost all brake feel, and there was no power-assisted steering. So in a car park, it was really heavy. But this is one of those cars, I can still remember it now, driving it for the first time thinking, oh, I like this. And it just flew round corners. You didn't even have to drive it that quickly to get excited. It was just a genuinely lovely handling car. This is a long way round of what I'm talking about. These are the special cars you remember from your youth that you just think, this is great. And that feeling has always stayed with me. And it's interesting. I'll be interested to hear what the listener thinks about this and those cars that you just think, you get to a certain age and you've had 30 or 40 cars, but one or two stand out. And for me, one of those was the Volkswagen Scirocco.
Oh, okay. So I get you here. You're not talking about the sort of pin-up racing cars or the things that we think should be handled brilliantly. You're talking about those cars that you've kind of encountered that are just honest hot hatches and things that just don't look that great, but when you get in, they just seem to work. And I because looking at this Scirocco, I kind of like, it's front wheel drive probably, and it doesn't really on the face of it look that much fun. But if you're mentioning that one, I think the one I would mention is I've had an Alpha Spider, and that was okay in the corners, and I had fun with that, especially if you get a bit heavy right foot. But Alphasids, my mate Tim had a 1984, I think it was, Alphasids. It was one of the last ones, and it was a beaut. And I remember we spun that round, done some donuts in the car park with it back in the day, and it was just really, really fun to drive, really scrabbly and front wheel drivey. Pedals very, very close together, so I've got size 12 feet, which didn't help. But he had little feet, so he was able to rag it round. And the thing with that car that was interesting is that he got it and he sort of modded it up to make it even better, because I think out of the factory they were okay, but he was able to do things with it. He had the knowledge. I was a little bit jealous of that car and his knowledge as well, but he uprated the shocks, the springs, he tuned the engine, all the important stuff. And in his words, it had unbelievable handling for a front-wheel drive, rusty, in his words, Italian shitbox. He sold it for a Golf GTI, and he says he rues the day of when he did that. And if he could rewind the clock, he'd have that car back in a heartbeat. This is what you're talking about. It's those memories of cars that were sort of average on the face of it, but you just remember really enjoying. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, some cars, I think, are just magic. They are just fantastic out of the box, and they don't really need fiddling with. And you might get a really lucky car that's got an extra special 2 horsepower or somebody's done something to it. But this is just the magic of certain cars that you remember thinking, I've driven something before that and it wasn't that good. I've driven something after it, a bit bland. These are cars that you thought you might like. But then you get into these and you think, oh my God, now here is another example. I never thought I would like this because it is the boring model of the range. So this is a 1987 BMW
Sounds
525. Yes, exactly. But this is the 525e Lux Automatic. Now the 525e was the boring one of the BMW E28. If you want like BMW E28 saloons, you go for the M535i. This is the boring one that is actually good on MPG. But what they did to the engine, they took a normal 2.5 engine, they bored it out slightly, and they gave it a lot of torque. And this is a car that I bought and thought, oh, it's boring. But it looks quite nice because I like a 5 Series, but I can't afford the proper one that everybody else likes. But it drove beautifully. And actually, because it had this special engine that was designed for economy, it had loads of torque. And this is one of the first cars I drove as a grown-up. So I was no longer on the ragged edge and on the red line of the rev counter and ramming it through the gears, because you couldn't, because it was an automatic. But it drove so beautifully, it had so much torque. It was a magical car, even when it looked like an old man's car. And I absolutely love this 525e. And there's one on the screen now, which is for sale, actually. It's a gorgeous one in blue. And you look at it and you think, oh, that's quite a plain car. But they used to drive amazingly. And this is the point about these cars. It was just a little sprinkling of magic that made them different. And that 525e was an absolute corker.
Yeah, because back in the day, before these became designed for fleets and company cars, this was sort of the sporty choice, wasn't it, to your executive car? And it cost a lot of money as well back in the day, we shouldn't forget. But if you're into this, you didn't just want a boring, I don't know, what would you have been offered? A princess maybe, or something else boring and British. This would have been if you were able to either get some extra dodgy company car or you were funding out of your own pocket. This was a sporty equivalent.
Yeah, it's only 125 brake horsepower, but the chassis was really special in these. And actually, I learnt to drive slightly more as a grown-up. I wasn't always taking the risky manoeuvres and revving these cars out. You could actually do that police thing of making progress. You could drive quickly, but nobody would really notice. And that's what I really like about these 525Es. And actually, looking into this one, it's 82,000 miles. It's a really nice one.
You can tell we're getting on in years because we're getting excited about saloon cars. I was excited about a Mercedes saloon the other week. Now you're getting excited about a 5 Series saloon. But there's something about it, I think, and the value that they represent as well is definitely worth talking about as well. I suppose the flip of this is really the worst cars to drive. What's your memory of the worst car that you've driven?
It's definitely the MG Midget 1500 rubber bumper. I could not get that thing to go in a straight line, and that was the opposite of magic. It just would not go where I wanted it to. So that was a bit of a struggle. And also a 2-door classic Range Rover. I remember the early Range Rovers, the 3.5 V8, which carburettor fed, really slow. They had huge wobbly steering. The distance between second and third gear was like 6 feet. And that was a really bad drive. I wanted to drive one of those for ages, got in it and went, So that's the opposite of what I'm talking about here. Those are cars, where the other ones are cars.
Yeah, mine was not really a classic car, but it was a Fiat Uno, probably the biggest piece of crap I've ever driven, vague as hell, and just rubbish. And it used to, unless it was summer in Milan, the throttle used to freeze in the winter. So I was on the motorway and then suddenly I couldn't get any control on the throttle. So I had to pull that over and let it sort of somehow heat up. But that was a bit rubbish and a bit vague. Generally, I'm sort of with you. I think the cars that are sort of unexceptional to look at, but had a little bit of an edge to them, they were the most fun because the expectation was low, wasn't it? If you got into Sirocco, you're not expecting to be blown away. If you get into an Alfa Sud, you're kind of not expecting to be blown away. But if you warm them up and you drive them with a heavy right foot, they sort of rewarded you. So that's cool. So yeah, if you're listening to this and thinking we've missed a sort of an obvious choice on this, what's the best car you've driven? And it doesn't have to be expensive. It can just be something that just sticks with you to this day and think, I wish I'd never sold that, or I wish I had that car. It was my mate's car. Let us know. Get in touch with us on our socials. We're at the Tyre Kickers UK on Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook with the Tyre Kickers, and that's 3 separate words. So before we go, let's kick a couple of tyres in the classifieds. Here's a couple of things we've spotted. I've spotted one on Facebook after I'd gone through the whole marketplace thing of is this a scam or not. What have you got first though, Max?
Well, having been to that auction this week, I ended up sitting in quite a few R107 Mercedes SLs. So I'm back on those, to be honest. I've never very far from them, but I'm back on them. I've ordered another book. I'm on the forums. And I've just been looking at them. And I kind of, the last time I drove one, I drove a 420 SL, which is the V8, quite heavy. And I just went, I didn't quite like this. It didn't have the magic that we just talked about. However, talking to some people at Farnborough, they were saying try the 300 SL because it's got the inline six. It's a lot lighter. So I found a nice one of those. It's a 1989 and they were all galvanized after 86. So we talked in previous episodes about the rust on these. The post 86 are really nice. This is an 89 3-litre black leather, black outside, 92,000 miles, full service history, and it is £34,000. Bit toppy, but I'm really into those. I may be doing some undercover tyre kicking at some dealers soon, so don't tell anybody.
Yeah, let's go and do that together. Let's go and try and squeeze. I'll try and squeeze into an SL and see if we can test drive some. Okay, that's a good one. And here's one for you. I sent this to you earlier. Do you fancy a project?
I'm still getting over it.
1980 Alpha Sud for restoration, and that sentence is doing a lot of heavy lifting. 995. It's a sort of a browny orange colour, but when you scroll through the photos, have a look at these, Max.
Jeez,
I'm not sure there's anything you could actually weld onto. Should this be rust in peace, or is there any metal there left saving? Do you think it's one of the original, the first generation ones, isn't it?
Yeah, I've just got to the engine pictures, and the carbs are off, and all the carbs are rusty, and it's no, nobody would take that on. It's just not worth it. It's a 2-door Alpha Sud, so it's a great looking car. It's got the beige cloth interior, which is nice as well. But there's rust marks on every panel. No thanks. That's one for you. Happy Christmas. I'll buy it for Christmas for you.
So that's about it for this episode 9. But just before we go, a quick request. If you've enjoyed this, can you please hit subscribe on the platform you're listening to, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify or whatever. You'll not only get the next episode as soon as it drops, but it'll also help tell that platform that we're worth a listen. It all sort of works the algorithm and nudges us up and helps us get seen.
Also, if you know someone who would enjoy this, and obviously that is a big ask, please share the episode with them and point them in our direction.
And also get involved by liking and commenting on our socials, please. Facebook, it's the Tyre Kickers, 3 separate words. But our main outlet for photos of cars, general musings, reaction, thoughts, spots, all that sort of stuff is Instagram. You'll find us there. We're at the Tyre Kickers UK.
Even if you're antisocial, and we're talking about me here, please get on our socials and let's chat cars.
But until the next time when we kick more tyres, see you then. Is it 5?
I think there's 6.
You might need to really rattle through
these. But then I think this is I think the next feature is pretty short, isn't it? But I think if I just...
we're going.